Folks, it is good to be back in terms of gaming reviews. It's been a while since we last talked about a video game. I'm going to say this again probably after the logo, but I should mention that while you're watching this video, we are very close to hitting 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's been a long journey to this point, and I'm very grateful for all the support and love you guys have given. And so please, if you do enjoy this video and if you have not subscribed yet, make sure to hit that button down below. And if you guys do enjoy it and you want to see more, I look forward to seeing you guys again and seeing more interactions with you guys on future videos. So without further ado, let's get started. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is the next part of the Cal Kestis storyline after Fallen Order and is now available on PlayStation 5 and Xbox. And this is a game that I was very excited for, and I'm so excited to make this as the comeback to doing game reviews on my channel. It's been a minute. I miss doing these. I miss talking to you guys about video games that I was playing. There's several reasons for that, why there wasn't a review for a long time. But before we get started, I do also want to make sure that if you have played the game, great, but if you haven't, there are going to be spoilers in this review. You have been warned about that. The marketing has been pretty sparse when it comes to giving away a lot of details for good reason. And so without further ado, let's talk about Survivor, in which we follow Cal Kestis 5 years after the events of Fallen Order, in which a lot has happened, including the breakup of the band that we had in the first game. And things are getting more and more desperate as the Empire tightens its grip on the galaxy. And things are becoming more scarce because now it comes to a point where Cal is wondering if all of this is worth it. And when it seems like there is some kind of hope and there is some way to bring in new Jedi and new Padawans in order to safely train them somewhere, he embarks on a quest which has its fair share of shortcomings and trials and tribulations. I'll go more into the trials and tribulations in a bit, but Fallen Order is a game that I really enjoyed. I really loved what they pulled off with that one, what Respawn did, and it was a very daunting one at first because people saw the name EA attached to it and they were worried because EA with Star Wars, the first couple of games, people were not totally happy with, but Fallen Order managed to do something really great. And so naturally there was a lot of hype for Jedi Survivor. And I can say after having played it now that I really enjoyed Survivor as well. Did I like it as much as Fallen Order? Well, that's a little debatable. I think in some places I liked it a little bit more, in some places a little less. I did, however, have a little more issue playing Survivor at times because there are a lot of different things going on when it comes to frame rate issues and stutterings and stuff like that, which I did not have all the time with in Fallen Order. I had some less time with glitches. And one of the biggest things that Survivor has going for it is that the performance mode isn't always performing. So sometimes when I switched over to 60 FPS, the game lagged and it wouldn't always give you 60 FPS. It gave you between 30 to 60, like 45 at most. And as a result of that, sometimes when you came to certain sequences where you were trying to do some crazy stunts, it would often lag and it led to a couple of crashes as well. I didn't have that with Fallen Order, so I think that was something that was disappointing for sure. And for a long time, I had to play the game locked on fidelity mode, which was about 60 frames per second, but which was 4K, but 30 frames per second. And that sometimes can be a problem for a lot of people because 30 FPS in 2023 gets a lot of flack. I don't mind 30 FPS depending on the kind of game it is. Like if it's something very cinematic, like something like Survivor is, then I'm okay with 30 FPS. I think that it works for that medium. It really, again, comes down to the game that you're playing. But overall, I do think that that could have been fixed up considerably because it does play pretty smoothly when it does on the 60 FPS performance mode. But this was one major issue that I had throughout, and I think it seems to be a problem that many were having. There were points where enemies would just sort of stand still as you just go to town, just beating them up. Sometimes there would be some spawning issues where you'd show up and you just spawn into a fight and then one hit and you're down, which was a little weird. That was a little dumb. But nonetheless, despite all of that, let's get those out of the way. What I really liked about Jedi Survivor from the start is the combat. It has improved considerably since Fallen Order. Cal has obviously grown a lot as a Jedi, and you can tell there are things that he's being able to do in this game that you just were not being able to do in Fallen Order. He's become very, very powerful, and it's sort of tapping into a side of him as a Jedi which is not particularly great, the dark side, if you will. And the game has some of that as well, because there are moments where Cal is definitely tested to the limits, and he'll have to do something which is not entirely the Jedi way, and it'll involve a very drastic maneuver. And in that sense, he will tap into the dark side, and it leads to some moments which are like just basically rampages across an Imperial security base, for instance. That happens much later on in the game. That was insane. But beyond that, what you get to do in terms of like, you know, especially like lightsaber maneuvers, things that you eventually build up on when it comes to, you know, the customization and the stuff that you can do when it comes to the skills that you're learning along the game as you get those skill points. I think they have improved on that quite a bit. And the stuff that you can do with BD1 is also really great. Like, he's much more formidable in this one. He's doing a lot more stuff. He's not just scanning and learning a lot of things. He's helping you in fights as well from time to time. He's helping you activate some things really considerably well. Like, there are moments in the game where he'll get you out of a bad situation, which I really liked. And there is a lot of stuff that they do with allyship in this game, which really comes into handy as well. Like, for a while in the game, you're working along with this other rebel named Bode, who turns out, you know, as the game progresses, there's a complicated story around him, which I'll get to. But I like the fact that, you know, the stuff that you're being able to do with that, there's a control where you can have someone else come in and give a hit. It was very good, the co-op, in a very co-op mode way. I thought that was effective. There's stuff that you can do with Merrin also as a result of that. That's really, really cool. There's a whole storyline with Cal and Merrin that I really liked, which I saw coming from game 1. And so in game 2, seeing it play out, great. You know, that saw that one coming. So, you know, good for him. The visuals are absolutely stunning. There are some moments that just absolutely pop off the screen, such as this one over here right behind me. I love this particular one. I took this screenshot and I had to use it as the backdrop for the review. But there's a few other sequences that look absolutely incredible. There's a scene where they have to pass through this galaxy storm sort of thing in order to get to a planet, which looked incredible. There's a few sequences with fight sequences in particular that are outstanding. There's a scene in at one point where you have to defend a Jedi hidden like fortress sort of place in Jeddah, and all these Imperial forces are just coming at you over and over and over again, and the way that was handled was outstanding. You're sort of just laying waste to Imperials, and then eventually at one point there is a boss battle that does take place, and like I said, there's spoilers in this review, and it turns out to be Darth Vader. That fight was fantastic. Those were towards the end of the game, though. There's a lot of stuff in the final few hours that's pretty outstanding. Leading up to that, the stuff that you get to do on Coruscant in the beginning, I really like. The opening act is very desperate. It's very, you know, distressing at times because Cal is not entirely winning in this circumstance. It kind of reminded me the entire game of like The Empire Strikes Back, where it's like, yeah, there's some... I gotta keep it on. There are some things where, you know, you have the characters facing very desperate situations, but you're also like, oh, but they're winning. They're still getting by. It's like, yeah, but at what cost? There's a lot of bodies on the floor, despite the fact that they managed to get out of the situation, and Survivor has a ton of that. It very much harkens on that, like, aspect of how badly the Empire has brought them down. But the game also really expands on the High Republic stuff that if you've been following like the books and, you know, stuff that they've been doing recently with the literature, they have decided to make that a very core component of things of Star Wars going forward. And so a major chunk of Jedi Survivor's plotline revolves around High Republic stuff. You're following some older Jedi named Centauri Kree and Dagan Gera, who are trying to find a solitary place for Jedi to train and to, you know, be given that peace to be able to do so on a planet called Tanalorr. I thought that was really, really interesting. And it eventually, the plotline that revolves around the fact that Dagan Gera is still with us, and he's not entirely there in terms of the stuff that he wants to accomplish, and that not everybody seems to be on his side. What do you eventually get with that? I thought that was also really, really effective, and he does end up being one of the main antagonists of the game. It's a very weird situation because there's almost a similarity to what him and Cal want. It's like we both want the same thing, but your approach to it is crazy. My approach to it is trying to be more rational, but both of them are also arguing on which one works because things are becoming so much more desperate and so much more insane when it comes to the ongoings in the galaxy. It sort of turns out to be this, like, Charles Xavier, Magneto kind of dynamic that they have going on for a little bit, but eventually, one side definitely turns out to be more villainous than the other. At the same time, you have to fight other bosses as well, and you have Dagon, who is sending bounty hunters and his right-hand man Ravis in order to get to you, and those fights are pretty intense as well. If you're not an experienced gamer, I would recommend playing it on story mode because you might have a better shot at it. As you work up the levels, it's going to get much, much tougher. There were a couple of times where I had to sort of switch difficulty because sometimes you're just getting wiped out in like one hit. Like in the fight with Vader, if you ever get caught in that red zone and he starts force choking you, it's over. It's done. So if you want to try and survive that in some way and you're like, oh, well, I don't want to keep respawning and coming back, if you're one of those gamers, then you might have a better time lowering the difficulty. That's just all I'm going to say to you about that. As for the writing of the game, I think it's really good. I think the story which it follows through, like I've told you all so far, it's pretty interesting. It's very good. There are some things that require you to know stuff that happened in the games, between the games. Like there's a novel called Battle Scars, which I would suggest reading because certain things come up in this one and you're like, when did this happen? And if you'd read the book, then you probably know about that stuff. If you've been following the High Republic storyline, then there's probably going to be some things that you see and you go, oh, that's interesting. New characters that are introduced as a result of that, they'll definitely probably have more meaning to you, even though they're pretty great as is in the game. Like, for example, there's a droid from the High Republic left behind named Z. This turns out to be one of the best aspects of the game. She's really entertaining as a character, and she's someone who has a very inherent sense of curiosity. She's just got a voice. Like, BD1 has his beeps and boops. I figured if he could talk, like, in words, he'd probably be more like Z. Like, there is this very interesting, like, parallel that you can create between both of their inquisitiveness. It's one of the best aspects of the game. And when it comes to, like, other stuff, like, well, let's talk about Bode right now that we're here. Bode's character eventually turns out to be an antagonist and a villain because it turns out that he's trying to do a safe thing for his daughter, and he used to be a Jedi who survived the Purge, Order 66. And he goes into hiding, and then eventually he strikes a deal with the Imperials, and he's like, all right, fine, I'll help you get, details on other Jedi in the galaxy and, take them down. Eventually that leads to him betraying Cal and the rest of his team, and it leads to some very heartbreaking, tragic, deaths as a result of it, including Seer at the hands of Vader, which was something that I figured at some point that was going to happen again. There are some things where I feel like if you follow Star Wars enough, you'll be able to see them and go, I figured that was going to happen at some point. I figured that was going to happen at some point. But it doesn't overall take away from those moments. Like, there are some things which are absolutes. It's also because you know when this game is taking place. You know what happens right after this, to put it like a certain way. Like, Darth Vader is not going to get defeated in this game, because there's still about 20 years of stuff after this with, the original trilogy and stuff like that, which Vader very much makes it through, and he's absolutely fine. But nonetheless, the game manages to be very, very effective in terms of that. There are some decisions that I think some people would be a little apprehensive with. For instance, the entire storyline with Bode, the way it eventually concludes, some people might think, well, that's kind of irrational. Like, you should think about the fact that you're doing all of this for your daughter and that you should not be making such rash decisions. But I would say that it fits perfectly because, you have to consider that, as a dad, what would you be willing to do for your child? And in those moments, he's probably thinking, I'm doing the best thing for my child. And so there is that sort of irrationality that comes in the middle of it. Now, that's debatable as to whether or not you appreciate the choice that they made, but the game also handles it in a way that it's not exactly satisfying. Like, when you eventually get to that point, you're not like, hell yeah, we're gonna defeat Bode, it's gonna all work out, he's gonna die, and happy ending. No. It's a bittersweet game, almost through and through. Characters die. There is genuinely emotional damage that is dealt to Cal. He is teetering the line of light and dark a lot, especially towards the end where he's embracing the dark side a lot more. And I think these are the game's strongest assets. I only wish it was a little smoother when it came to some of the gameplay. I wish I didn't have so many issues with the frame rate. I wish I didn't have so many issues every now and then when it came to some of the mechanics around it. Those are minor things, maybe, but they did affect the gameplay considerably. There are times where I would reboot the game and it would work fine. But then after a little bit of play, if I paused and went back, the frame rate dropped. Don't really understand that, you know? There's some challenge things also that are pretty good. Like, you go through these few modules where it seems like there's a force sense of an unresolved conflict or an unresolved stance, and then eventually you go and you deal with that. There's a couple of them that were pretty cool. There's this one where you have to fight like 150 droids. That was awesome because you just get to go to town on 150 droids from like the Separatist era, so, you know, you'll keep hearing them go on about stuff. There is this one conversation that I really like. They gave a lot of dialogue to these droids. I thought I'd share that conversation with you.
Take a look at that view. Is that a giant crater? Wow. I got it so easy. Guard the cliff, crush the locals, look at the scenery. Nobody's getting past me, not without a blaster hole in him. I wonder if I'll get promoted for doing such a good job. Then I'll get the other droids to guard the cliff. Oh, but then I won't see the scenery. Now that's a dilemma.
Spoiler alert, you kill the droid, and Cal says, well, dilemma resolved. So, well, you know. The one thing that I will say, though, is that I think Fallen Order is a bit more tightly paced than Jedi Survivor. I think Fallen Order had a little better structure to it. I think Survivor does have a little bit of flimsiness, especially in the middle portion. Regardless of that, overall as a game, I still very much appreciated everything that Jedi Survivor pulled off. I really like this game at the end of the day. I think they're 2 for 2 as far as this series is concerned. I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy or if it's going to be more than that. It really comes down to the creative team, but I do like this particular story that's being told in Star Wars, and I'm looking forward to playing the third game as and when it happens, and following this crew on some adventures once again. I'm gonna give Star Wars Jedi Survivor a 9 out of 10. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's been a while. If it seems a little rusty, if I haven't been able to cover everything, I apologize for that. But it was very fun talking about games once again. And let me know what you guys think of Jedi Survivor if you have played it as well. As always, if you like this, guys, please do subscribe. Thank you very much for watching once again. And may the Force be with you. That only happened on one hand, didn't it?